me now. Mike, how you doing, my man?
I am. I feel like this is a day in, but it's a day I've been waiting for a long time. When we can move that spend the month of September and our pretension, and I think that's a perfect way to describe the attending that was the 2014 Cleveland Indians, and we can get down to talking about this. I wouldn't even call it a mess, just how to fix this.
It's not a mess.
For sure.
I will give you that there's obvious. Look, no Indians need to do. There's reasons that they didn't win more games than they did. The way you look at the end of the season, nobody in baseball spots, far from just the Indians. Matter of fact, every what if this happens and that happens that you and I and Jeff and all the other guys laid out throughout the month, they surpassed all, like nobody. They all just kept saying, hey, here, Indians, Seattle didn't want it, Oakland didn't want it, Kansas City barely wanted it down this. But I don't know that I'd go as far as you did, because some wins got you in the playoffs this year. It doesn't. I get you, though. The Indians should have won 100 games with the kind of pitching that they had. So from that aspect, we can attack. But, I'm not giving it back. I mean, you plays out as the way it plays out. But, I mean, literally, in spite of themselves, they were in it until the end, because I don't know. I think it's more parity this year. I mean, look across. Nobody was trying to take it. Nobody was really trying to take it. Even Detroit at the end tried to give it back before they said, okay, let's get back to being Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in the middle part of the season. I think one of the days, I think you laughed at me when I said I just don't think that their spot team's good enough to be playoff teams, and I still think that that's true. I think there's really only 4 teams, and that might even be questionable. I mean, I think if you were ranking the 10 playoff teams, I think the only say in the American League that would even crack the National League would be the Angels. I mean, I would think if you were ranking the teams from 1 to 10, the top 5 might all be National League teams except for the Angels. I mean, 4 of those 5 would all be National League teams. So I think you're right in that it was a year of parity. My thing that, I certainly have said a million is I will not accept the mediocrity as okay from the Cleveland Indians, because there is just way too team should have been or could have been a playoff team, and you don't print and then tell us at the end of September, well, we did the best we could. That's not allowed to go together in my mind, and this in my mind is and I don't see how it can really be anything otherwise.
I hear you, and we can talk about all of that. And by the way, for those of you guys, now here's one episode. Yesterday when Dan Wismar was on, and we talked about the rumors that the Dolans are having some meetings and perhaps in investigating moving the team. And I was telling them, I said, look, it is what it is, and I understand. Moneyball. I totally get it. I know why it is, how it works. I know that it works. I know that it's a function of the marketplace and it's what you have to do. Doesn't mean that I like it. Doesn't mean that I enjoy it. I mean, of course, like everybody else, I would prefer the easier route. And that's what I wanted to say. I got to go to here's a problem. Like, some people have already hit me up and said, Jerry, haven't you listened to the press conference the other day? They're not changing nothing. And I'm like, I hear you. But I actually went back through it for you and I to talk about. I read every word of it. And, man, I look at the line, and this is what where I'm saying about not liking Moneyball just as a fan. I noticed, I can't remember, was it Tito or was it Antonetti that said, the easy thing to say is, hey, just go get a power bat. And I'm like, stop right there. Why can't we ever just do the easy thing? Like, if that's the easy thing to do, then go do it. That's where fans get frustrated. Not that you won't spend $300 million, that when there's 1 or 2 things that you go, man, that could really change this thing and blah, 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 just go do it. But that line, you isolate it, it's like, okay, well, just for once, can you just go do it the easy way? Can we go try and do it the easy way? Just go get that power bat and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with, it'd be nice to try it the easy way. I think as we look at if you want to look at this Indians team and the organization as a whole, I mean, I have a hard time right now being critical of the Dolans, and I think the reason I'm not critical of them is they've spent. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that they haven't spent money. They've committed $260 million to payroll since they hired Terry Francona. I can't sit here and tell you where that ranks compared to the other 29 teams, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're a lot closer to the top in the commitment that they've made to payroll in the last 2 years than they are to the bottom. And I know 2 years is a small sample size of commitment, and I also know that they're not, looking to exceed, their yearly payroll of where they're at of 80 and 85 million. In no way am I saying, that the Dolans are just walking around throwing bags of cash around at ball players now all of a sudden. That's not the case. But I will say, I feel like they have made a greater commitment than they have in the past. And I think the person who should wear a lot of the blame of the 2014 season is that front office. And that goes right back to where you were talking about trying to do it the easy way. Why do they have to be the smartest guy in the room? If everyone can solve the problem so easily, why do they have to go, the road not traveled? Sometimes the road not traveled is not traveled for a reason.
For a reason, so, exactly.
Right. And I have definitely been critical of Chris Antonetti and the front office, and will be for this season, because I think they're to blame. And I can tell you one of the stories going on our site in the next week or so is going to address, that $260 million that has been committed to this team and how it's been spent. Because my answer is, don't get upset at the Dolans for not spending money. Get upset at Chris Antonetti for how it's been spent. Don't be upset that don't blame the Dolans for Michael Bourne or Nick Swisher. Blame Chris Antonetti. He's the one that signed him. I have a hard time believing that Paul Dolan walked into Chris Antonetti's office and said, I demand that you sign Nick Swisher. Not in a million years do I think that happened. But, Antonetti and Terry Francona and the front office, that was a decision that they made. Hindsight is always 20/20, and I'll be the first. Signing Nick Swisher at the time I thought was a great idea, and I felt the same way with Michael Bourne. And those two contracts weigh on this team now like gigantic anchors.
About those two?
If you read our story, or the story that we posted today about defense, in 2 years' time, Jerry, Michael Bourne has gone from the best defensive center fielder in all of baseball, Jerry, to the third worst.
Yes,
and he's not going to get younger. I'm pretty sure of that. He's not. Yeah. I have a hard time thinking with age he's going to get rangier as he moves farther into his 30s. But he's going to make more money. I know that. And the same is true with Swisher. This was a guy that when they acquired Bourne, the next day, you can go look it up in Terry Francona's press conference, he said to the media, Nick Swisher is an excellent first baseman. Go look it up. I guarantee it's there. The day after they signed Michael Bourne, that night they signed him. The next day he said Nick Swisher is an excellent first baseman. One of two things from that statement: either Terry Francona was wrong, or Nick Swisher has got really, really bad over the last 2 years. Because if he was an excellent one 2 years ago, he is not anymore.
And I agree with you. Defensively, I think that's it. He's fallen so far off the page so quickly. I do agree with that. When you brought up the two, I was never. Now, I will. I know this sounds like hindsight. I'll be the first one to tell you that I loved Michael Bourne. And I was probably wrong like everybody else. He's been okay at best. And like you said, defensively fallen off the deep end. I was not with Swisher. I mean, just 2 weeks before, whatever, when they tried to get Victorino for the same ridiculous amount of money, basically, I didn't want either one of those. I said, man, we're going for. I did not buy that we were even going to get the Nick Swisher that he was the few years before, man. Like, you were going to get, like, maybe one halfway decent year out of it. I don't know. I'm not perfect. I get a lot of stuff wrong. Nick Swisher's one that I saw coming. I said, this is going to be a disaster at the end of this contract, you know, and it didn't even make it to the end. It made it 1/4 of the, possibly 1/5 of the way through the thing, you know. So, but regardless, but I'm with you, because when I have this Dolan discussion with people, and this is where I walk that line that you just mentioned, because I think there's two trains of thought. The one post Terry Francona is absolutely what you said. His front office came to him. Now, I also will say that he also had a large chunk of cash that he had to attempt to spend, because you couldn't just make all that money from selling the TV station and then not reinvest some of it in the team. That was part of it. But regardless of that, his people told him, here's who we want to go get, and he did write those checks. So for the last 2 years, yes, that's completely the front office misspending the money that they were allowed to spend. I think prior to that, you could go practically a decade, and then that's different. And that's where everybody, when they say cheap, I cannot argue with some of the things that happened over the last however many years. But you're absolutely right, and people get mad at me when I make that point, because they're like, you're sticking up for the Dolans. And I'm like, no, I'm not. If they sold the team tomorrow, I wouldn't shed a tear over it. I would just go, well, that's the last owners of the Indians, and here's the new ones, and I would move on to the next. So I'm in no way sticking up for them, but people get so fired up about that with them being cheap, and I just think that's the definitive, where it delineates a bit, is when you get into when they signed those contracts, as you said, $200+ million committed, and then now you turn that to the front office. And then the other thing too that trips me out, and maybe you've got a take on this, is when you look at the front office and things here, when they spent that, when they find, forever you've been told you can't spend money. Now, finally, your mom and dad say, here, you can go take the credit card to the store, and then you just completely buy a bunch of broken merchandise. Like, how can the same front office that strikes out for the most part in free agency do so well at finding jewels in trades? Because in the trade market, that's where they've built most of this team, and they strike out more than often in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating. I guess I'm not advocating the firing of anyone, but I would also say,
do you understand it?
What's that?
No, but do you understand it? You're really into this. Do you understand
For sure.
how the same front office can evaluate diamonds in the rough so well in the trade market and misevaluate straight free agency?
No, I don't. I don't. And I don't know if it, and this is a Mark Shapiro term that he has used several times, by his own words, they fish from the bottom when it comes to free agency. And I don't know if their ability to sign free agents is not just hindered because they fish from the bottom. I think we all know that. But, I guess in some ways they're so unaccustomed to being able to pick from the top shelf that they don't even know what they're shopping for when they get there.
There it is.
I mean,
right
I don't know how else to say it. I mean, because of exactly what you just said, they can find a diamond in the rough like they're falling off of trees when it's time to make a trade. But when it comes to free agency, they seem to struggle, and by their own rules. I mean, I have sat in focus groups and discussions with fans, and I have heard Shapiro and Antonetti discuss, some and factual points. Signing free and risky way to get better. You're signing guys normally on the second half of their career. You're signing them in their 30s and paying them for their 20s. These are all things that we've heard. I don't know this to be true. I just know that Mark Shapiro said it, that on the free agent market, a win costs approximately $8 expensive to me. Even if his math's off, that's still pretty expensive, plus or minus, $1 million either way. It sounds pretty expensive to me. So in the regard that not just do they get it wrong, but they get it wrong consistently in that area. I mean, it's not as if signing big contracts, they've had a couple